Hi, my name's David Anderson, and at our father's Christmas will reading, my brother got the family estate worth millions. I got a sealed letter. He laughed and said, "That's all you're worth, some old man's goodbye note." The whole room joined in. Even my wife, Charlotte, didn't defend me. She handed me divorce papers right there and walked out without looking back. But none of them knew. The letter wasn't goodbye. It was instructions. And when I read it aloud, the laughter died. The screaming didn't come from me. It came from the ones who thought they'd already divided up my father's empire. So tell me, what would you do if the people you trusted most spent years building their fortune on erasing yours? What would you do if one envelope held the power to destroy everything they'd stolen? This is my story. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It was the kind of December morning that made everything look clean and forgiving. Fresh snow covered the streets of Ashford Heights, softening the edges of the brick buildings and bare trees. I drove slowly through the old neighborhood, past the bakery where Dad used to take us for cinnamon rolls every Sunday, past the park where we'd played as boys, past the corner where I'd learned to ride a bike while my brother William watched from the porch, already too cool to join in. The house came into view at the end of Maple Ridge Drive, 3 stories of stone and timber, with tall windows that glowed amber in the winter light. It looked like something out of a holiday card, the kind of home that made strangers slow down just to admire it. Dad had built his construction company from nothing and poured everything into this house. Every beam, every fixture, every detail had his fingerprints on it. I parked on the street, even though there was room in the driveway. William's luxury sedan was already there, polished and gleaming like it had just rolled off the showroom floor. Next to it sat a sleek sports car I didn't recognize, probably belonging to his new girlfriend, Amelia Moore. She was some corporate strategist he'd been parading around town, the kind of woman who wore designer everything and made sure you noticed. Inside, the house smelled like pine and cinnamon, the same way it always did during the holidays, but the warmth stopped at the scent. The air felt cold, formal, like we were gathering for a board meeting instead of a family occasion. The living room was full of people, some I recognized, others I didn't. Cousins I hadn't seen in years. Dad's business partners. The family attorney, Mr. Harrison, standing near the fireplace with his leather briefcase. And William, right in the center of it all, shaking hands and laughing too loud. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, his hair styled perfectly, his confidence filling every corner of the room. When he saw me, he didn't walk over, just gave me a nod, the kind you'd give a stranger. Charlotte, my wife of 6 years, stood near the Christmas tree, holding a glass of wine and talking to Amelia. She glanced at me when I entered, but her expression didn't change. No smile, no acknowledgement, just a blank stare before turning back to her conversation. I found a seat in the back row of chairs they'd arranged, away from the fireplace, away from the center of attention. That's where I'd always been in this family. The younger brother. The quiet one. The one who worked construction jobs while William climbed the corporate ladder. The one who still drove a 10-year-old truck while William traded in his car every 2 years. Dad had been sick for 18 months. Cancer, aggressive and unforgiving. I'd visited him 3 times a week, sometimes more. I'd sit by his bed and we'd talk about old projects, about the houses he'd built, about the craftsmanship that had become a lost art. William visited too, but always with a purpose. Always with paperwork. Always asking about assets and accounts and properties. I remembered one afternoon, maybe 3 months before Dad passed. I was helping him into his wheelchair and he grabbed my hand, looked me right in the eye. "David," he said, voice raspy but firm, "I want you to know something. You've been more of a son to me in these last months than William's been in years." I told him not to talk like that. Told him William was just busy, just stressed. Dad shook his head. "Busy building his own empire on the foundation I gave him. You're the one who remembers what matters." I didn't know what he meant then. I thought it was just the medication talking, the exhaustion of fighting a losing battle. Now, sitting in that living room surrounded by people who barely knew my name, I wondered if he'd been trying to tell me something. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat, and the room quieted. He was a tall man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of lawyer who'd been with the family for decades. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. "Thank you all for gathering here today," he began, his voice measured and professional. We are here to execute the last will and testament of Richard Anderson, as per his final wishes. I want to remind everyone that Mr. Anderson was of sound mind when these documents were prepared and notarized. William leaned forward in his chair, fingers steepled like he was about to close a business deal. Mr. Harrison continued. Richard Anderson's estate includes the family home at 847 Maple Ridge Drive, valued at approximately $2.3 million, the Anderson Construction Company with assets totaling $4.7 million, various investment accounts, properties, and personal items. The room was silent except for the crackling of the fire. To William Anderson, Mr. Harrison read, I leave the family home, the construction company, and controlling interest in all business holdings. William smiled. Not a surprised smile, but a satisfied one, like he'd been expecting this all along. A few people clapped. Someone said, congratulations. Amelia squeezed his shoulder. Then Mr. Harrison looked at me. To David Anderson, he paused. Reaching into his briefcase, I leave this letter, to be opened and read at this gathering. He walked over and handed me a cream-colored envelope. My name was written across the front in Dad's handwriting, shaky but unmistakable. The room went quiet again, but this time it was different. This time it was the kind of quiet that comes before laughter. William stood up, walked over, and looked at the envelope in my hands. That's it? He said, loud enough for everyone to hear. A letter? That's all you're worth? Some old man's goodbye note? Someone chuckled. Then someone else. Then the whole room was laughing, not cruelly, but pityingly, like I was a forgotten item in an estate sale. Charlotte stood up then. I thought maybe she'd say something, defend me, tell them to stop. Instead, she walked over with an envelope of her own. Since we're handing out papers, she said, placing it on the arm of my chair, here are the divorce papers. I've been waiting for the right moment. This seems appropriate. She didn't look at me when she said it. Just turned and walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. I can't be married to someone who couldn't even earn his father's respect, she said over her shoulder. I'm done waiting for you to become something more than you are. The door closed behind her. The room was silent for maybe 3 seconds. Then the murmuring started. Whispers. Sympathetic looks mixed with relief that it wasn't them. I sat there, holding the envelope in one hand and the divorce papers in the other. My face felt hot. My chest felt tight. But I didn't cry, didn't shout, didn't beg Charlotte to come back or defend myself to the room. I just looked down at my father's letter, at the careful way he'd written my name, and I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not sadness, something quieter, something that felt like understanding. I stood up slowly, tucked the divorce papers under my arm, and held the envelope up to the light. Through the paper I could see dense handwriting. Multiple pages. Well, I said quietly, looking at William, should I read it now, or would you prefer I wait until after the champagne? William laughed. Go ahead, little brother. Let's hear Dad's goodbye speech. I looked at Mr. Harrison. He nodded. So I opened the envelope. My hands didn't shake as I unfolded the letter. 3 pages, front and back, written in Dad's careful print, the kind of writing he used when something mattered, when he wanted every word to be clear. I cleared my throat and began to read aloud. My dearest David, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're sitting in a room full of people who think they understand what I've done. They don't, but you will. The murmuring in the room stopped. A few people shifted in their seats. I continued. I've spent the last year watching my sons, really watching them. William visited me often, but every conversation was about money, about assets, about what he'd do with the company when I was gone. He never asked how I felt, never asked if I was afraid, never asked what I needed. William's smile faltered. His jaw tightened. You, David, you came and sat with me. You brought me books I'd mentioned months earlier. You fixed the loose hinge on my bedroom door without being asked. You remembered my birthday when everyone else forgot. You treated me like a father, not an inheritance. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Someone in the back coughed. The fire crackled. So yes, I'm leaving William the house and the company. But here's what nobody in that room knows except you, Mr. Harrison, and me. I paused, looking up. Mr. Harrison's expression was neutral, but there was something in his eyes, something that told me to keep reading. The house William is inheriting has a lien against it for $1.8 million. I took out the loan 6 months ago and used the money to establish something else. The construction company he's so eager to run is $3.2 million in debt. I stopped paying suppliers 4 months ago. I let contracts lapse. I made sure the business looked successful on paper but was rotting from the inside. The room erupted. Not with laughter this time. With shock. William stood up. That's not possible. I reviewed the books. You reviewed the books I let you see, I read, continuing Dad's words. The real financial records are with Mr. Harrison, and they tell a very different story. You wanted the empire, William. Now you have it. All of it, including every debt, every lawsuit, every creditor calling for payment. Amelia grabbed William's arm. He shook her off, staring at me like I'd just set his world on fire. But I wasn't done. David, here's what I've done for you. Over the past 18 months, I've been quietly liquidating my personal assets. The investment accounts William thinks are part of the estate? I closed them. The rental properties downtown? I sold them. The savings bonds, the stock portfolio, the vintage car collection, all of it converted to cash. My voice caught for a second. I steadied myself. That money, all $6.4 million of it, has been placed in an irrevocable trust with your name on it. Mr. Harrison has the paperwork. It's yours, David. Clean, clear, and completely separate from the estate William is inheriting. The room exploded into chaos. People stood up. Voices overlapped. William's face went from shock to rage to something I'd never seen before. Fear. This is fraud, he shouted, turning to Mr. Harrison. He can't do this. He was sick. He wasn't thinking clearly. Mr. Harrison opened his briefcase calmly and pulled out another folder. Mr. Anderson was evaluated by 3 independent physicians during the time he made these arrangements. All certified he was of sound mind. Every transaction was legal, documented, and notarized. I have the records here if anyone wishes to review them. William grabbed the folder from his hands, flipping through pages frantically. His face went pale. I kept reading, my voice steady now. William will tell you I've ruined him. He'll say I was vindictive, that I punished him unfairly. But here's the truth, David. I gave him exactly what he wanted. He wanted the house. It's his. He wanted the company. It's his. He wanted to be the successful son, the one who inherited the empire. He got it. He just never asked what that empire was really worth. Someone near the back started crying. I think it was one of Dad's old friends. You, David, never asked for anything. You showed up, you cared, you treated me like I mattered, not like I was a bank account waiting to close. So I'm giving you something William never understood the value of. Freedom, security. A chance to build your own life without the weight of my mistakes or his greed. I folded the first page, moved to the second. My throat was tight, but I pushed through. There's one more thing. Charlotte, your wife, has been meeting with William for 8 months. I have photos, David. Timestamps. Text messages. Mr. Harrison has copies if you need them. She knew about William's plan to contest the will. She knew about the debts. She was in on it, helping him figure out how to cut you out completely once I was gone. I looked up. The room was dead silent. Every eye was on me. She's leaving you now, isn't she? Right after the reading? That was always the plan. William promised her a payout once he secured the estate. Now that there's nothing to secure, watch how fast she disappears. I looked at the door Charlotte had walked through minutes ago. Then I looked at William. His face was red, his fists were clenched. Amelia had stepped away from him, her expression shifting from shock to calculation. She was already measuring her exit. You destroyed him, William said, his voice shaking. You destroyed our father's legacy out of spite. No, I said, reading Dad's final words on the page. I saved my son from becoming you. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Mr. Harrison stood up. If anyone wishes to contest the will, you're welcome to do so. But I should inform you that Mr. Anderson anticipated this. Every transaction, every decision, every dollar moved has been documented and reviewed by 3 separate law firms. It's all legal, it's all binding. William looked around the room, searching for support, for sympathy, for anything. But people were looking away. Some were gathering their coats. Others were whispering to each other. One of Dad's business partners, a man named Samuel Thompson, walked over to William and said something I couldn't hear. Whatever it was, William's face went even paler. I stood up, tucked the envelope into my jacket pocket, and picked up the divorce papers Charlotte had left. "Merry Christmas, William," I said quietly. Then I walked out of that house, past the Christmas tree, past the fireplace, past all the people who'd laughed at me 20 minutes ago. The snow was falling harder now, covering my truck in a thin white blanket. I brushed it off the windshield with my hand, got in, and sat there for a moment. Through the front window of the house, I could see William standing in the middle of the room, surrounded by people but utterly alone. I started the engine and drove away. Behind me, the house that had been my father's pride, my brother's obsession, and my childhood home faded into the snow. I didn't look back. The first 3 days after the reading, I didn't do much of anything. I stayed in my small apartment on the east side of Ashford Heights, the one Charlotte had always complained was too small, too plain, too beneath us. I drank coffee. I stared at the letter. I read it again and again, not because I didn't understand it, but because I needed to believe it was real. On the 4th day, I met with Mr. Harrison at his office downtown. The building was old but well-maintained, with dark wood paneling and brass fixtures that had probably been there since the 1950s. His secretary offered me coffee. I accepted, even though I'd already had 3 cups that morning. Mr. Harrison's office was exactly what you'd expect. Bookshelves lined with legal volumes, a massive oak desk, and a window overlooking the town square where a giant Christmas tree still stood, lights twinkling even in the daylight. "David," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk, "I'm glad you came. Your father left very specific instructions about what to share with you after the reading." He pulled out a banker's box, the kind with a lid and handles, and set it on the desk between us. "This," he said, opening it, "is everything." Inside were folders, dozens of them, organized with colored tabs and labeled in Dad's handwriting. Bank statements, property deeds, medical evaluations, legal affidavits. But what caught my eye was a smaller box inside the larger one. Mr. Harrison lifted it out and opened it carefully. Inside was a flash drive, several envelopes, and a small notebook. "Your father was meticulous," Mr. Harrison said. "He knew William would fight this. He knew Charlotte would deny everything, so he prepared." He handed me the notebook first. I opened it to the first page. It was dated 18 months earlier, right around the time Dad's diagnosis came back terminal. The entry read, "William visited today. Spent 45 minutes asking about life insurance policies. Didn't ask about treatment options. Didn't ask how I'm feeling. Note to self, watch him more carefully." I flipped through more pages. Each entry was similar. Observations about William's visits, conversations about money, meetings with lawyers I'd never heard of. And then, about 8 months ago, the entries changed. "Saw William having lunch with Charlotte at the Riverside Grilly. They didn't know I was there. Took photos from across the street. They were looking at documents, laughing, planning something." My stomach turned. I kept reading. "Hired a private investigator. Name is Logan Martinez, former police detective. Gave him instructions to follow William and Charlotte discreetly. He's sending me weekly reports." Mr. Harrison reached into the box and pulled out a thick folder. "These are those reports." I opened it. The first page was a surveillance log. Dates, times, locations. William and Charlotte meeting at coffee shops. At restaurants. At a hotel outside of town. The investigator noted. Subjects met for 2 hours. Appeared intimate. Discussed plans for inheritance distribution. Subject William mentioned. Cutting David out completely. There were photos. Dozens of them. William and Charlotte sitting close in booths, holding hands across tables, standing outside buildings I didn't recognize. "Your father wanted you to know the truth," Mr. Harrison said gently. "Not to hurt you, but to protect you." I set the photos down. My hands were shaking now. "There's more," Mr. Harrison said, picking up the flash drive. He plugged it into his computer and opened a folder. Inside were audio files. He clicked on one. Charlotte's voice came through the speakers, clear as day. "He's so predictable, William. He'll never see it coming. He trusts everyone." William's voice replied, "Once Dad's gone and the estate is settled, we'll file for divorce. You'll get half of whatever David has, which is nothing. But we'll make sure you're taken care of. You've earned it." Charlotte laughed. I've been playing the supportive wife for 6 years. I deserve more than taken care of. You'll get it, William said, once this is over. Mr. Harrison stopped the recording. Your father had recording devices installed in several locations, all legal, all on his own property. He documented over 40 conversations between William and Charlotte over 6 months. I sat back in my chair, trying to process it all. Why didn't he tell me? I asked. He wanted to, Mr. Harrison said, but he was afraid you wouldn't believe him. Or worse, that you'd confront them and they'd find a way to cover their tracks. He wanted everything documented, ironclad, before you knew. He pulled out another folder. This is the financial documentation for the trust he established in your name. $6.4 million as stated in the letter. It's held in a secured account. No one can touch it but you. William can't claim it. Charlotte can't claim it in the divorce. It's yours. I stared at the documents. Account numbers, transfer records, notarized statements. Your father spent his last year protecting you, Mr. Harrison said. He knew he couldn't stop William from wanting the house or the company, but he could make sure you were taken care of, and he could make sure William got exactly what he deserved. I looked at the banker's box full of evidence. What do I do with all this? That's up to you, Mr. Harrison said. If William contests the will, we'll use it in court. If Charlotte fights the divorce, we'll present it. If they leave you alone, you can keep it as insurance. But I suggest you make copies. Store them somewhere safe. Your father went to great lengths to give you the truth. Don't let it disappear. I left his office 3 hours later with the banker's box in my truck. I drove to a storage facility on the edge of town and rented a unit. I made copies of everything. The documents, the photos, the audio files. I stored the originals in the unit and took the copies home. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and went through it all again. Every entry in the notebook, every surveillance photo, every recorded conversation. The evidence was overwhelming, systematic, irrefutable. My father hadn't just left me money, he'd left me power. The power to defend myself, the power to tell the truth, the power to make sure William and Charlotte couldn't rewrite history. I thought about the letter again. The way Dad had written, you showed up, you cared, you treated me like I mattered. He'd been watching all of us, measuring our character. And in the end, he'd made sure the son who cared received more than money. He received vindication. I pulled out my phone and looked at the missed calls. 17 from William, 9 from Charlotte, 3 from Amelia. I deleted them all. Then I opened my contacts and found Logan Martinez, the private investigator. I called him. Mr. Martinez, I said when he answered. My name is David Anderson. My father hired you 18 months ago. I know who you are, he said. His voice was gruff but not unfriendly. I'm sorry for your loss. Your father was a good man. I need your help, I said. I need to make sure everything he documented stays protected, and I need to know if William or Charlotte tries anything. There was a pause. Then he said, your father already paid me for 6 more months of work. He said you'd call. What do you need? I told him. And for the first time since the reading, I felt like I wasn't alone. Dad hadn't just left me a letter, he'd left me an army of truth. 2 weeks after Christmas, William called a family meeting. Not at the house on Maple Ridge Drive, he'd already moved out of there. The bank had started foreclosure proceedings faster than anyone expected. Instead, he rented a conference room at the Ashford Heights Business Center, a glass and steel building downtown that tried too hard to look important. The invitation came through email, formal, cold, sent to everyone who'd been at the will reading plus a few extras. The subject line read, Emergency Family Meeting, Anderson Estate Matters. I almost deleted it. Almost. But something told me I needed to be there. Needed to see what William was planning. I arrived 15 minutes early. The conference room was on the 3rd floor, all windows and white walls. William had arranged the space like a corporate presentation. Rows of chairs facing a projection screen. A podium at the front. Bottles of water on a side table. He was treating this like a business pitch, which I suppose it was. People filtered in slowly. The same cousins from the reading. Dad's old business partners. A few people I didn't recognize. Probably William's associates. Amelia was there too, sitting in the front row, looking less polished than usual. Her designer clothes were still expensive, but something about her posture had changed. She looked uncomfortable. William stood at the podium, shuffling papers, checking his phone. He wore another expensive suit, but this one didn't fit quite as well. Or maybe he'd lost weight. His face looked drawn, older somehow. When he saw me walk in, his jaw tightened. He didn't acknowledge me, just looked back at his notes. I took a seat in the back row again, same position as the will reading, but this time, I wasn't hiding. I was observing. Charlotte wasn't there. I'd expected that. The divorce papers she'd served me at the reading were sitting with my own attorney now, being contested on grounds of fraud and conspiracy. She'd made herself scarce since the truth came out. Mr. Harrison entered last, carrying his briefcase. He nodded at me, then took a seat in the middle of the room. His presence wasn't neutral, it was protective. William cleared his throat, and the room quieted. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady but lacking its usual confidence. "I know the will reading was shocking for everyone. There's been a lot of confusion, a lot of misinformation spread around. I wanted to bring everyone together to clarify the situation." He clicked a button and the projection screen lit up with a slide that read, "The Truth About Richard Anderson's Estate." My stomach tightened. Here it comes. "My father was not well in his final months," William continued. "We all knew he was sick, but what we didn't know was that his illness had affected his judgment. The decisions he made regarding the estate were not made by the man we knew. They were made by someone who was scared, medicated, and frankly, not thinking clearly." Someone in the front row nodded. A few others murmured in agreement. William clicked to the next slide. It showed a timeline of Dad's illness, doctor appointments, medication schedules. As you can see, Dad was on significant pain medication during the time he made these so-called arrangements. Opioids, sedatives, drugs that are known to impair cognitive function. He looked directly at me for the first time. My brother took advantage of that. He isolated our father, convinced him that I was only interested in money, and manipulated him into creating a trust that gutted the family business and our legacy. The room erupted in whispers. Some people turned to look at me. I sat still, my face neutral. "I have statements," William said, clicking to another slide, "from caregivers who witnessed David spending hours alone with Dad, often with the door closed. I have financial records showing suspicious transfers made during the final 6 months of Dad's life. And I have reason to believe that the letter David read at the will reading was fabricated." My hands clenched into fists, but I didn't stand, not yet. William clicked to another slide, this one showing bank statements with certain transactions highlighted. These transfers, totaling over $6 million, were made from accounts Dad had maintained for decades. Money that was supposed to go to the family, to the business, was diverted into a trust that only David can access. That's not estate planning, that's theft. Mr. Harrison stood up. "Mr. Anderson, I need to stop you right there. Every accusation you're making is not only false, it's legally actionable. Your father was evaluated by 3 independent physicians during the time he made these arrangements. All certified he was of sound mind. I have those evaluations with me if you'd like to review them again." William's face flushed. Those evaluations were done months before the transfers. Things changed. His condition deteriorated. "Actually," Mr. Harrison said, pulling a folder from his briefcase, "the most recent evaluation was conducted 2 weeks before your father passed. Dr. Samuel Thompson, a neurologist with 40 years of experience, spent 3 hours with your father and concluded he was, quote, fully capable of making informed decisions regarding his estate and showed no signs of cognitive impairment. Would you like me to read the full report?" The room went silent. William's carefully constructed narrative was already cracking, but I could see he wasn't done. He clicked to another slide, this one showing a photo. It was grainy, taken from a distance, but it clearly showed Charlotte and me at a restaurant. "This," William said, his voice rising slightly, "was taken 3 months ago. David and Charlotte, my own wife at the time, having what appears to be a very intimate conversation. While David wants everyone to believe he's the victim, he was actually having an affair with my partner." The room gasped. Several people turned to stare at me. I felt my face go hot, not from guilt, but from rage. That's when I stood up. "That's an interesting photo, William," I said, my voice calm but carrying across the room. "Would you like to know what we were actually discussing that night?" He faltered. "I don't need your explanations." "Charlotte called me," I continued, walking slowly toward the front of the room. She said she needed to talk about Dad's health, that she was worried about me. What she actually did was spend 2 hours trying to convince me to sign a power of attorney document that would give you control over any inheritance I might receive. I reached into my jacket and pulled out my phone. I recorded that conversation, William. Would you like me to play it for everyone here? His face went pale. I clicked play. Charlotte's voice filled the room, tinny through the phone speaker, but perfectly clear. David, you have to understand, William knows how to handle money. You don't. If your father leaves you anything, you should let William manage it. I've drafted some paperwork that would make things easier. My voice on the recording, why would I sign over control of something I might inherit? Charlotte, because you trust family, don't you? Because William knows what's best. I stopped the recording. That's not an affair, William. That's attempted fraud. The room erupted. People were standing now, talking over each other. William gripped the podium, his knuckles white. You set me up, he said, his voice shaking. No, I replied. I protected myself, just like Dad taught me to. I walked closer to the projection screen. You want to talk about suspicious activity? Let's talk about the 43 times you met with Charlotte while she was still my wife. Let's talk about the hotel receipts, the text messages, the recorded conversations where you both discussed cutting me out of the estate completely. I pulled out a USB drive from my pocket and held it up. I have all of it, William. Every meeting, every lie, every plan you made to destroy me. Dad documented everything. He hired a private investigator. He recorded your conversations. He knew exactly what you were doing. William stumbled back from the podium. Amelia stood up and moved away from him, her face a mixture of shock and disgust. The house you inherited, I continued, Dad deliberately let it fall into debt. The company you were so eager to run, he sabotaged it. Not out of spite, but because he wanted you to understand what it feels like to inherit something worthless, to receive exactly what you valued him as, a transaction. I looked around the room. My father spent his last year watching all of us, measuring our character, and he made his decisions based on what he saw. William saw dollar signs. I saw a man who needed his son. That's the difference between us. Mr. Harrison stood up. If anyone in this room has questions about the legality of Mr. Richard Anderson's estate planning, I'm happy to provide documentation, but I want to be clear. Every action taken was legal, witnessed, and notarized. Mr. William Anderson's claims of incompetence and fraud are baseless and, frankly, desperate. He looked at William. If you proceed with contesting the will, you'll lose. And in the process, you'll expose yourself to multiple lawsuits for slander, fraud, and conspiracy. I'd advise you to accept the inheritance you received and move on. William looked around the room, searching for support, for sympathy, for anyone who still believed him. But people were avoiding his eyes. Some were gathering their things. Others were whispering to each other, casting glances at him that ranged from pity to disgust. Samuel Thompson, Dad's old business partner, stood up. He was a man in his 70s with white hair and steady hands. He'd known our family for 40 years. William, he said, his voice quiet but firm, your father called me 6 months before he died, told me what he was planning, told me why. I didn't interfere because I trusted his judgment. But I want you to know something. You didn't just lose an inheritance. You lost your father's respect. And that, son, you earned all on your own. He picked up his coat and walked out. Several others followed. William stood at the podium, alone, his carefully planned presentation in ruins around him. Amelia grabbed her purse and left without a word. Within 5 minutes, the room had emptied except for William, Mr. Harrison, and me. You destroyed me, William said finally, his voice hollow. No, I replied. You destroyed yourself. I just stopped pretending I didn't see it. I walked to the door, then paused and looked back. Merry Christmas, William, I said. I hope the house was worth it. Then I left him there, standing in an empty conference room he'd rented with money he no longer had, surrounded by the ruins of a reputation he'd never actually earned. Now, 3 weeks after the family meeting, I received a formal notice. William was suing me for undue influence, fraud, and misappropriation of estate assets. The lawsuit claimed I had manipulated our father during his illness and stolen millions that rightfully belonged to the family. He was asking for the trust to be dissolved, and all assets redistributed according to what he claimed were Dad's true intentions. The case was assigned to Judge Victoria Thompson at the Ashford County Superior Court. I'd heard of her. Everyone had. She was known for being thorough, impartial, and completely intolerant of games. If you came into her courtroom unprepared or dishonest, she'd tear you apart. My attorney, a sharp woman named Emily Johnson, met me at her office to prepare. She was in her 40s, with short dark hair and glasses that made her look like she could see through walls. She'd been practicing estate law for 20 years and came highly recommended by Mr. Harrison. "William's case is weak," she said, spreading documents across her conference table. "But he's hired Fletcher and Associates, which means he's serious about fighting this. They're expensive, and they're aggressive. They'll try to overwhelm us with motions, depositions, and discovery requests. The goal isn't to win, it's to bleed you dry financially and emotionally until you settle." "I'm not settling," I said. She smiled. "Good, because we have something they don't, the truth." The first hearing was scheduled for mid-January, a cold gray morning that matched the mood inside the courthouse. The building was old, built in the 1920s, with marble floors and high ceilings that made every sound echo. William arrived with 3 lawyers, all wearing identical dark suits and carrying matching briefcases. He looked confident again, like the conference room disaster had never happened. Charlotte was there too, sitting in the back row. Our divorce was still pending, tied up in the same legal mess as the estate. She wouldn't look at me. Judge Thompson entered and everyone stood. She was a tall woman with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her expression gave nothing away. "Be seated," she said, her voice carrying authority without being loud. "We're here for the matter of Anderson versus Anderson, estate dispute. Mr. Fletcher, you filed the complaint. Make your opening statement." Richard Fletcher stood. He was in his 60s, with perfect posture and a voice trained to command attention. "Your Honor, this case is about a vulnerable man taken advantage of during the darkest period of his life. Richard Anderson was dying of cancer, heavily medicated and isolated by his younger son, David Anderson, who used that isolation to manipulate him into disinheriting his eldest son and rightful heir, William Anderson." He gestured dramatically. "The trust established in David's name, containing over $6 million, represents the systematic looting of a family estate. We have evidence of suspicious meetings, altered documents, and a pattern of undue influence that cannot be ignored. We're asking this court to void the trust and restore the estate to its proper distribution." He sat down. Judge Thompson looked at Emily. "Ms. Johnson?" Emily stood, calm and measured. "Your Honor, what Mr. Fletcher calls undue influence, we call love. David Anderson spent his father's final months caring for him, not as an investment, but as a son. Every decision Richard Anderson made was documented, witnessed, and verified by medical professionals. We have 3 independent psychological evaluations confirming he was of sound mind. We have video recordings of Mr. Anderson explaining his reasoning. And we have evidence that it was William Anderson, not David, who engaged in manipulation and fraud." She placed a folder on the table in front of her. "We're prepared to prove that this lawsuit is not about justice. It's about greed, and we're confident this court will see that." Judge Thompson made a note. "I've reviewed the preliminary filings. This appears to be a complex matter. We'll proceed with testimony. Mr. Fletcher, call your first witness." Fletcher called Dr. Michael Miller, one of Dad's oncologists. He was a tired-looking man in his 50s who clearly didn't want to be there. "Dr. Miller," Fletcher began, "you treated Richard Anderson during the final year of his life, correct?" "I did." "And what medications was he prescribed?" "He was on a combination of opioid pain relievers, anti-anxiety medications, and sleep aids. Standard for someone with his diagnosis. And these medications, they can cause cognitive impairment, can't they?" Dr. Miller hesitated. "They can, yes, but not in every patient. But it's possible that Richard Anderson's judgment was compromised?" "Objection," Emily said, leading the witness. "Sustained," Judge Thompson said. "Rephrase, Mr. Fletcher." Fletcher tried a different angle. "In your medical opinion, could these medications have affected Mr. Anderson's decision-making abilities?" "In isolation, possibly," Dr. Miller said carefully. "But Mr. Anderson was monitored regularly. His dosages were adjusted to minimize cognitive effects." And he was evaluated multiple times specifically to assess his mental capacity. Each time he passed with no concerns. Fletcher frowned. But you didn't perform those evaluations, did you? No. They were conducted by neurologists and psychiatrists, as is standard for estate planning involving terminal patients. No further questions. Emily stood. Dr. Miller, in all your interactions with Richard Anderson, did he ever seem confused about who his sons were or what he was planning? No. He was very clear-minded when it came to his family. Did he ever express concerns about either of his sons? Dr. Miller glanced at William. He mentioned that his older son was primarily interested in his financial assets. He seemed disappointed by that. Did he ever mention David? Yes. He said David was the only one who visited him without an agenda, that he felt more like a father when David was around. Thank you, Doctor. Fletcher called several more witnesses. Dad's former secretary, who testified that William visited the office frequently to review financial documents. A neighbor who noticed I spent a lot of time at Dad's house during his illness. A financial advisor who confirmed the large transfers from Dad's accounts. But none of it proved fraud, none of it proved manipulation. It just showed that I was present, and Dad was generous. Emily dismantled each testimony with careful questions that revealed the full context. Then it was our turn. Emily called Mr. Harrison first. He walked through every document, every evaluation, every legal safeguard Dad had put in place. He presented the 3 psychological evaluations, all conducted by board-certified specialists, all concluding Dad was competent. Then Emily introduced the video evidence. She played a recording of Dad, sitting in his study about 2 months before he died. He looked directly at the camera, his voice weak but clear. I'm making this recording to address any questions about my mental state. I am Richard Anderson. Today is October 15th. I am of sound mind and body, despite my illness. I have made the decision to establish a trust for my son David, because he has shown me love and respect, not because I'm confused or manipulated, but because I know exactly what I'm doing. William has shown me who he is. I'm simply responding to that truth. The courtroom was silent. I watched William sink lower in his chair. Emily played 2 more videos. In one, Dad explained the debts he'd deliberately incurred. In another, he talked about discovering William's plan to contest the will. I'm not punishing William, Dad said in that recording. I'm teaching him. Maybe he'll learn that people are worth more than property. Then came the surveillance evidence. Photos of William and Charlotte meeting secretly. Audio recordings of their conversations planning to exclude me from the estate. Text messages discussing how to handle David once the inheritance was settled. Fletcher objected repeatedly. This is character assassination, Your Honor. It's not relevant to the question of undue influence. It's directly relevant, Emily countered. It shows that William Anderson was the one engaging in manipulation, not David. It establishes motive for this frivolous lawsuit. Judge Thompson allowed it. And as each piece of evidence was presented, I watched William's lawyers exchange increasingly worried glances. The final witness was Logan Martinez, the private investigator. He walked through his findings methodically. Dates, times, locations. He confirmed that Richard Anderson had hired him specifically because he suspected William was planning something. He presented his complete reports, all documented and time-stamped. In your professional opinion, Emily asked, did Richard Anderson seem confused or impaired during your meetings with him? Not at all, Martinez said. He was sharp. He knew exactly what he wanted documented and why. He told me he was protecting his son from people who would try to rewrite history after he was gone. Turns out he was right. When Martinez stepped down, Fletcher looked defeated. But he had one more card to play. He called Charlotte to the stand. She walked up slowly, dressed conservatively, her hair pulled back. She looked nervous, which was smart. Sympathy could work in her favor. Mrs. Anderson, Fletcher began, you were married to David Anderson during the time these arrangements were made, correct? Yes. Did you ever witness anything that concerned you about David's relationship with his father? Charlotte paused, then said, David was always very protective of his father, sometimes overly so. He didn't like William visiting. He'd make excuses, say Dad was tired or not feeling well. Did David ever discuss the inheritance with you? He mentioned that his father was planning to leave him something. He seemed excited about it, which I thought was strange given that his father was dying. I felt my jaw clench. Emily put a hand on my arm, steadying me. Did David ever say anything that suggested he was influencing his father's decisions? Charlotte looked directly at me. He said he was making sure he got what he deserved, that William had gotten enough over the years. Fletcher smiled. Thank you, Mrs. Anderson. Emily stood for cross-examination. She didn't look angry, just ready. Mrs. Anderson, you filed for divorce from David at the will reading, correct? Yes. Rather dramatic timing, wouldn't you say? I'd been planning it. That just seemed like the right moment. Right after you found out there was no money in the estate for you to claim in the divorce? Charlotte's eyes widened. That's not why I… Emily cut her off. You met with William Anderson 43 times while you were still married to David. Would you like to explain those meetings? We were discussing family matters. Family matters, Emily repeated. Is that what you call it when you're recorded saying once David's out of the way, we'll split everything? The courtroom erupted. Judge Thompson banged her gavel. Order! Emily played the audio. Charlotte's voice, clear and damning, discussing plans to exclude me from the inheritance and divide the assets with William. Charlotte's face went white. That's out of context. Is it? Emily asked. Because we have 47 minutes of recordings where you and William discuss various ways to cheat David out of his inheritance. Would you like me to play all of them? Fletcher stood. Objection, Your Honor. This is. Overruled, Judge Thompson said coldly. Answer the question, Mrs. Anderson. Charlotte looked at William, then at the judge. I want to invoke my Fifth Amendment right. You may step down, Judge Thompson said. The trial continued for 2 more days, but after Charlotte's testimony collapsed, the outcome was inevitable. Fletcher tried to salvage it with character witnesses for William, but none of them could overcome the mountain of evidence Emily had presented. On the final day, Judge Thompson delivered her ruling. I've reviewed all testimony and evidence presented in this case. It's clear to me that Richard Anderson was of sound mind when he made his estate decisions. It's also clear that this lawsuit was filed not out of genuine concern for justice, but out of greed and entitlement. She looked at William. Mr. William Anderson, you inherited exactly what your father intended you to have. The fact that it wasn't what you expected doesn't make it fraud. It makes it consequence. She turned to me. Mr. David Anderson, the trust established in your name is legal and binding. This court finds no evidence of undue influence or manipulation. The case is dismissed with prejudice. She banged her gavel. We're adjourned. William sat frozen. Fletcher gathered his papers quickly, already planning his exit. Charlotte left through a side door without looking back. I stood up, shook Emily's hand, and walked out of that courtroom with my head high. Outside, the sun was shining for the first time in weeks. Logan Martinez was waiting by his car, leaning against the hood. Congratulations, he said. Thank you, I replied, for everything. Your father was a smart man, he said. He knew exactly what he was doing. I nodded. Yeah, he did. As I drove home, I thought about Dad's letter again, about the way he'd written, you showed up, you cared. He'd spent his last year making sure I'd be protected, making sure the truth would survive him. And now it had. 6 weeks after the trial ended, the consequences started rolling in like dominoes, each one falling exactly as Dad must have predicted they would. The first to fall was William's reputation. News of the trial had spread through Ashford Heights faster than winter flu. In a town this size, everyone knew everyone, and gossip was currency. The story of 2 brothers, a contested will, and a spectacular courtroom collapse made for excellent dinner conversation. William's professional life crumbled first. Anderson Construction Company, the business he'd inherited with such pride, filed for bankruptcy within a month. The debts Dad had deliberately accumulated came due all at once. Suppliers who hadn't been paid in months filed liens. Contractors sued for breach of contract. The bank foreclosed on the Maple Ridge Drive house after William missed 3 consecutive mortgage payments. I heard through Mr. Harrison that William tried to salvage the company. He'd approached investors, pitched restructuring plans, even tried to sell off equipment and vehicles, but nobody wanted to touch it. The Anderson name, once respected in construction circles, had become synonymous with bad debts and broken promises. Samuel Thompson, Dad's old business partner, called me one evening in late February. "Thought you should know," he said. "William approached me about a loan. Said he could turn the company around if he just had some capital." "What did you tell him?" I asked. I told him the truth, that his father had called me before he died and explained everything. Told me the company was meant to fail, that it was a lesson, not a legacy. He paused. "William didn't take it well. I can imagine. He said you poisoned everyone against him, that you turned the whole town into your allies." Samuel's voice softened. "But that's not what happened, is it? You just stopped covering for him. And without someone cleaning up his messes, people finally saw what your father saw." I thanked him and hung up. The conversation stayed with me for days. Samuel was right. I hadn't destroyed William. I'd simply stepped aside and let him face the natural consequences of his own actions. Charlotte's situation unfolded differently but ended the same way. Our divorce was finalized in March. The judge, having reviewed all the evidence from the estate trial, ruled that Charlotte had entered the marriage and maintained it under fraudulent pretenses. She received nothing, no alimony, no settlement, not even half of our shared possessions. The prenuptial agreement she'd convinced me not to sign actually worked in my favor once her conspiracy with William was exposed. She left Ashford Heights 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized. I heard from Logan Martinez, who still kept tabs on things, that she'd moved to another state, changed her name on social media, and was trying to reinvent herself. But the internet has a long memory. Screenshots of the trial transcripts circulated. Her name appeared on legal forums as a cautionary tale. The fresh start she wanted kept slipping further out of reach. Amelia Moore, William's girlfriend, vanished the day after the family meeting collapsed. She'd clearly been with William for the wealth and status she thought he had. Once those illusions shattered, so did her interest. I saw her once, months later, at a restaurant across town. She was with someone else, a different wealthy-looking man, laughing the same way she'd laughed with William. Some people never change, they just change targets. The house on Maple Ridge Drive sat empty for 3 months before the bank finally sold it at auction. A young couple bought it for half of what it was worth. They didn't know the history, didn't care about the Anderson name. They just saw a beautiful house that needed love and attention. I drove by once and saw them painting the shutters, planting flowers in the garden Mom had started decades ago. It made me sad and hopeful at the same time. The house would have a new story now, a better one. William himself seemed to disappear from public life. His social media went quiet. His friends stopped posting photos with him. The few times I saw him around town, he looked diminished somehow, smaller. He'd stopped wearing expensive suits, drove an old sedan, kept his head down. We never spoke. There was nothing left to say. But the most significant consequence wasn't what happened to William or Charlotte. It was what happened to me. The trust Dad had established became active the moment the trial ended. $6.4 million, free and clear, with no strings attached except one instruction in a final letter Mr. Harrison gave me after the verdict. Build something that matters. I spent weeks thinking about what that meant. I could have traveled, bought a new house, lived comfortably without working another day. But that felt empty. It felt like wasting what Dad had worked so hard to protect. Then I remembered something he'd said once, years ago, when I was helping him on a job site. We were renovating a community center in a rough part of town, doing the work it cost because the center couldn't afford market rates. "You know why I do this?" he'd asked, gesturing at the half-finished building. "Because good work should serve people, not just profit. The money comes and goes, but what you build, if you build it right, that stays." So I started building. I established the Richard Anderson Foundation in April. The mission was simple: provide skilled trade education and job training for people who couldn't afford traditional college. Carpentry, electrical work, plumbing, construction management, the trades that Dad had mastered and that had given our family everything we had. I bought an old warehouse on the east side of Ashford Heights and converted it into a training center. Hired instructors who'd worked with Dad over the years. People who understood that teaching a skill meant teaching pride, discipline, and integrity. We offered free tuition, provided tools and materials, and connected graduates with jobs in the area. The first class started in June with 12 students. By September, we had a waiting list of 40. By December, our first graduating class had a 100% job placement rate. The local news did a story about us. The mayor showed up for a ribbon-cutting ceremony. People started calling it Anderson's second legacy, the one that actually mattered. I hired Logan Martinez as the foundation's security consultant and HR director. He brought the same careful attention to detail that he'd used investigating William, but now he was helping us vet instructors and protect students. "Your dad would be proud," he told me once. This is what he meant when he said build something. Mr. Harrison joined our board of directors, providing legal guidance and lending credibility to our operation. Emily Johnson helped us set up scholarship programs and navigate nonprofit regulations. Even Samuel Thompson contributed, donating equipment from his own company and occasionally teaching classes on business management. The foundation grew faster than I'd expected. We expanded into a second building by year's end, started offering evening classes for people who couldn't attend during the day, partnered with local businesses to create apprenticeship programs. The waiting list grew to over 100 names. I worked there every day, not because I had to, but because it felt right. I taught basic carpentry on Tuesdays and Thursdays, using techniques Dad had taught me. I watched students who'd never held a hammer learn to build furniture, frame walls, create something tangible with their own hands. The pride in their faces reminded me of the way Dad used to look at a finished project. One evening in late November, almost a year after the Christmas will reading, I was locking up the training center when a young man approached me. He was probably 22 or 23, wearing work boots and carrying a tool belt. "Mr. Anderson?" he said. "I just wanted to thank you. I graduated from your program in August, got hired by Thompson Construction last month. This is the first real job I've ever had. The first time I felt like I'm building something, you know?" I shook his hand. "That's what we're here for. My family, we didn't have money for college. I thought I was just going to bounce between minimum wage jobs forever. But this program, it changed everything." He paused. "Your dad must have been a good man to raise someone who'd do something like this." My throat tightened. He was. He really was. After he left, I sat in my truck in the parking lot and pulled out Dad's letter. I'd kept it in my glove compartment, the paper soft from handling, the folds worn from being opened and refolded hundreds of times. I read the last paragraph again, the part I'd read so many times I'd memorized it. David, money can build walls or bridges, houses or homes, empires or communities. I'm trusting you to choose wisely. Not because you're perfect, but because you understand that people matter more than things. Build something that proves that. Build something I'd be proud to put my name on. I folded the letter carefully and put it back. Looked at the warehouse, at the lights still glowing inside where the night janitor was cleaning up, at the sign above the door that read Richard Anderson Foundation Building Futures, Honoring Legacy. Yeah, Dad, I think I got it right. The vindication wasn't in watching William fail, it wasn't in the courtroom victory or the money in my account. It was in this, in taking what Dad had given me and using it to give others what they needed. In building something that would outlast both of us. That's when I finally understood what he'd been trying to teach me all along. Success isn't about what you accumulate, it's about what you create that serves others. And for the first time since that Christmas morning when I'd walked into the house on Maple Ridge Drive, I felt completely at peace. Christmas came around again, exactly 1 year after the will reading that had changed everything. I woke up in my apartment, the same one Charlotte had always complained about, and felt something I hadn't felt in years: gratitude. The foundation was closed for the holiday week, but I'd promised myself I'd stop by to check on things. It had become a habit, walking through the empty training center, running my hand along the workbenches, imagining the students who'd be back after New Year's. The building felt alive, even when it was quiet, filled with potential and purpose. I made coffee, strong and black, the way Dad used to drink it. Outside, snow was falling again, the same kind of soft, forgiving snow that had covered Ashford Heights the previous year. But this time, looking at it didn't make me feel cold. It made me feel clean. My phone buzzed with messages. Text from Emily Johnson wishing me Merry Christmas. Another from Logan Martinez with a photo of his family around their tree. One from Samuel Thompson inviting me to dinner sometime in January. I responded to each one, grateful for people who'd stood by me when it mattered. There was nothing from William, nothing from Charlotte. I didn't expect anything, didn't want anything. Some doors close and lock behind you, and that's how it should be. I drove to the training center around noon. The parking lot was empty, except for one car I didn't recognize. When I unlocked the front door, I found Mr. Harrison sitting in the lobby, reading a newspaper. "Merry Christmas, David," he said, folding the paper and standing up. "Mr. Harrison, I didn't expect to see you here." "I wanted to give you something," he said, reaching into his briefcase. He pulled out a small wooden box, about the size of a book. "Your father left this with me. Instructions were to give it to you 1 year after the will reading, provided certain conditions were met." My heart picked up speed. What conditions? That you'd used the inheritance wisely, that you'd built something meaningful, that you'd honored his memory without seeking revenge. He smiled. "I'd say you've exceeded every expectation." I took the box. It was made of cherry wood, hand-carved with intricate details along the edges. Dad's work. I recognized his style immediately. "He made this?" I asked. "About 2 years ago, before he got too sick to work with his hands. He spent weeks on it, said it was important." Mr. Harrison put a hand on my shoulder. "Merry Christmas, David. Your father would be incredibly proud of who you've become." After he left, I sat in my office and opened the box slowly. Inside was another letter, shorter this time, and a small brass key. I unfolded the letter and began to read. "David, if you're reading this, it means a year has passed and you've done what I hoped you would. You've built something good. You've proven that the Anderson name can mean something beyond profit margins and property values. I'm proud of you, son. I always was, even when I couldn't say it out loud." I had to stop reading for a moment, blinking back tears. "The key in this box opens a safety deposit box at Ashford Heights Bank, box number 847, same as our address on Maple Ridge. Inside, you'll find some things I saved over the years. Photos, letters, memories I wanted you to have. But you'll also find the original deed to a property on the north side of town. 20 acres of land I bought 30 years ago, planning to build something special on it someday. I never got around to it. I want you to have it. Build something there, something that lasts." The letter continued, "I know this past year has been hard. I know what William and Charlotte put you through. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from that pain, but I hope I gave you the tools to survive it and grow stronger. You're twice the man William ever was, not because you're perfect, but because you care about people more than power. Never lose that. Live well, David. Love deeply. Build beautifully. And know that every day of your life you made me proud to be your father. Merry Christmas, son. I love you, Dad." I sat there for a long time, holding the letter, letting the tears come. They weren't sad tears, not exactly. They were relief. The final piece of grief I'd been carrying around without realizing it. I picked up the brass key and turned it over in my palm. 20 acres. Land Dad had been saving for decades. I didn't know what I'd build there yet, but I knew it would be something good. Something that honored what he'd taught me. Something that served the community he'd loved. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, but something made me open it. "Saw the news story about the foundation. Looks good. Congrats." It was from William. I stared at the message for a full minute, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. 1,000 responses ran through my mind. Some angry, some bitter, some that would reopen wounds that had finally started to heal. Instead, I typed 3 words. "Thanks. Merry Christmas." Then I put the phone away. Not because William deserved kindness, but because I deserved peace. Carrying anger was like carrying weight that wasn't mine to bear anymore. Dad had taught me that too in his own way. He'd forgiven me for all the times I'd failed, all the ways I'd fallen short. The least I could do was let go of the need to punish someone who was already living with the consequences of his choices. I locked up the training center and drove to Maple Ridge Drive. I hadn't been back since the house sold. Didn't think I wanted to. But something pulled me there today. The new owners had transformed it. New paint, fresh landscaping, Christmas lights strung along the roofline. Through the front window I could see a family gathered around a tree. Parents, 2 young ones, a dog running between them. Laughter. Warmth. Life. That house had been full of ghosts for too long. Ghosts of expectations, of disappointments, of everything William and I had fought over without ever really understanding what we were fighting for. Now it was just a house again. A home, the way it was always meant to be. I sat in my truck across the street, engine idling, watching the family through the window. The father picked up one of the young ones and spun them around. The mother laughed, covering her mouth with her hand. The dog jumped up, tail wagging. It was a scene from a different life, a different story. One that had nothing to do with wills or betrayals or brothers who couldn't see past their own greed. I put the truck in gear and drove away, this time without the weight of regret. On the way home, I stopped at the cemetery. Dad's grave was on a hill overlooking the town, under an old oak tree he'd always liked. I brushed snow off the headstone and sat down on the cold ground beside it. "Hey, Dad," I said quietly. "Got your Christmas present. The letter, the key, all of it. Thank you for everything, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. For protecting me even after you were gone. For teaching me that being good is harder than being successful, but it matters more." The wind picked up, rattling the bare branches above me. I like to think it was him, listening. "I'm okay now," I continued. "Better than okay. The foundation is growing. People are learning trades, getting jobs, building lives. And I'm going to use that land you left me to build something even bigger. I don't know what yet, but I'll figure it out, just like you taught me." I stood up, brushed snow off my jeans. "Merry Christmas, Dad. I miss you. But I'm going to be all right. You made sure of that." As I walked back to my truck, I felt lighter than I had in years. The past was finally where it belonged, behind me. The future was open, full of possibility. And somewhere, I hoped Dad was smiling, knowing that his plan had worked better than he'd ever imagined. 2 years had passed since that Christmas morning when everything changed. 2 years since I'd sat in a room full of people who thought they knew how my story would end. They were wrong. But I don't think about that anymore. Not the way I used to. It was December again, and I stood on the 20 acres of land Dad had left me, watching the final construction crew pack up their equipment. The building behind me was nearly finished. 3 stories of brick and timber that echoed the house on Maple Ridge Drive, but bigger, purposeful, designed to serve rather than impress. The Richard Anderson Trade and Community Center. That's what the bronze plaque by the entrance would read when we opened in January. It had taken a full year of planning, permits, and construction, but we'd done it. A place where the foundation could expand its programs, where students could live while they learned, where families could gather for community events. Dad's 20 acres had become something he'd be proud of. "Mr. Anderson?" a voice called from behind me. I turned to see Marcus Chen, my project manager, walking over with a tablet. He was one of our first graduates, a kid who'd come to us 3 years ago with nothing but determination and a willingness to learn. Now he was overseeing million-dollar construction projects. "Final inspection is scheduled for next week. Inspector says we're in good shape. We should be ready for the ribbon cutting on schedule." "Good work, Marcus," I said, taking the tablet to review the checklist. "Your dad would be proud. You've managed this whole project like a seasoned pro." Marcus smiled, but it was bittersweet. His father had passed away 6 months into the build. A heart attack, sudden and devastating. Marcus had wanted to quit, said he couldn't focus. I'd told him what Dad told me once, that the best way to honor someone is to finish what they'd want you to finish. He'd stayed, and the building was better for it. "Hey," Marcus said, looking past me toward the parking lot. "Isn't that?" I turned. A sedan I didn't recognize had pulled up near the construction fence. The door opened, and William stepped out. I hadn't seen my brother in person in almost 2 years. We'd exchanged a few text messages, brief, surface-level things that didn't address anything real, but this was different. He'd come here, to my project, on purpose. He looked different. Thinner, older, wearing jeans and a simple jacket instead of the designer suits he used to favor. His hair was graying at the temples. He walked slowly, hands in his pockets, like he wasn't sure if he should be here. "I'll give you two some privacy," Marcus said quietly, heading back toward the building. William stopped about 10 feet away from me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The winter wind filled the silence, carrying the smell of fresh lumber and cold earth. "Nice building," he said finally, his voice lacking the confidence it used to carry. "Dad would have liked the design." "That was the idea," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. He paused, looking at the ground. "I wanted to talk to you, if you have time." I studied him for a moment, There was no arrogance in his posture, no hidden agenda in his eyes, just exhaustion and something that looked like regret. "There's a coffee shop about 10 minutes from here," I said. "Meet me there." The coffee shop was a small local place called Brewer's Corner, the kind with mismatched furniture and art from local students on the walls. I ordered black coffee. William ordered the same. We sat at a table by the window, the conversation between us as uncertain as the weather outside. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," William began, wrapping his hands around his cup like he needed the warmth. "About Dad, about what happened, about who I was." I didn't respond, just waited. "I was angry for a long time," he continued. "Angry at you, angry at Dad, angry at the whole situation. I blamed everyone but myself. Spent months trying to figure out how to fight back, how to prove I was right." He looked up at me. "But I wasn't right, David. I was just entitled." "What changed?" I asked. "I hit bottom," he said simply. "Lost everything. The house, the company, Amelia, my reputation. Had to move into a one-bedroom apartment on the south side. Started working construction jobs, the kind Dad used to do when he was starting out. Manual labor, 40 hours a week for $12 an hour." He took a sip of coffee. "And you know what I realized? I'd never actually worked before. Not really. I'd managed, I'd networked, I'd made deals. But I'd never built anything with my own hands. Never felt what it's like to be exhausted at the end of a day because you physically created something." "Dad tried to teach you that," I said quietly. "I know. I just thought I was above it. Thought I was destined for something bigger." He laughed, but it was hollow. Turns out bigger isn't always better. I watched him carefully, looking for signs of manipulation, for the angle he was working. But all I saw was a broken man trying to put himself back together. "I'm in therapy now," William said. "Have been for 8 months, trying to figure out why I became the person I became. Why Dad's approval never felt like enough. Why I needed to win so badly that I destroyed everything around me." "And what did you figure out?" I asked. "That I was chasing something that didn't exist," he said. "I thought if I was successful enough, rich enough, important enough, I'd finally feel like I mattered. But it never worked. Because I was measuring myself by the wrong metrics. Dad tried to tell me that. You tried to show me. I just couldn't see it until I lost everything." He set his cup down and looked directly at me. "I didn't come here to ask for anything. I'm not looking for forgiveness or reconciliation or a job at your foundation. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. What Dad did, it wasn't punishment. It was mercy. He was trying to save me from myself." The coffee shop was quiet except for the hiss of the espresso machine and quiet conversations from other tables. Outside, snow had started falling again, the same gentle snow that seemed to mark every turning point in this story. "I destroyed a lot of people," William continued. "I hurt you, hurt Charlotte, though she made her own choices, hurt Dad in ways I can't take back. I'm not asking you to forget that or pretend it didn't happen. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did, and I'm sorry. I'd imagined this moment before, during the angry months after the trial. I'd imagined telling William exactly what I thought of him, listing every betrayal, making him feel the weight of everything he'd done. But sitting across from him now, seeing a man who'd already been hollowed out by consequences, those speeches felt unnecessary. "What are you doing now?" I asked instead. "Working for a small renovation company, learning the trade properly. My boss, guy named Rick Thompson, no relation to Samuel, he's teaching me how to do things right. Says I have potential if I can get out of my own way." William smiled slightly. "I'm starting at the bottom, David, literally. But it feels more honest than anything I did before." "That's good," I said, and I meant it. "I saw the news articles about your foundation," William said. "The training center, the apprenticeship programs, now this community center. You're doing what Dad always wanted to do, building something that matters." "I had good teachers," I said. William nodded. "Yeah, you did." He stood up slowly. "I should go. I just wanted to say what I needed to say. Thank you for hearing me out." I stood too. We faced each other across the table, two brothers who'd traveled very different roads to get to this moment. "William," I said, "if you're serious about learning the trade, about doing things right, the foundation offers advanced classes on Saturdays. Specialized techniques, historical restoration, sustainable building practices. No charge. Just show up and do the work. His eyes widened slightly. "You'd let me." "I'm not doing it for you," I interrupted. "I'm doing it because that's what the foundation is for, teaching people who want to learn. If that's you, then you're welcome. But you show up on time, you do the work, and you treat everyone there with respect. No special treatment, no shortcuts." "I understand," William said quietly. "Thank you." He left the coffee shop, and I watched through the window as he got in his car and drove away. I didn't know if he'd show up on Saturday. Didn't know if this was a real change or just another version of the same pattern. But I'd offered the opportunity. What he did with it was up to him. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily Johnson. "Board meeting at 4 p.m. We need to finalize the center's programming schedule. Also, someone wants to meet you, says it's important." I drove back to the training center, my mind still processing the conversation with William. The facility was busy despite the approaching holidays. Students working on final projects, instructors preparing for the spring semester, administrative staff handling enrollment for January classes. Emily was waiting in the conference room with someone I didn't recognize. A woman, probably in her mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back and tired eyes that had seen hardship. "David, this is Rebecca Torres," Emily said. "She wanted to talk to you about her son." We shook hands and sat down. Rebecca pulled out a folder and opened it carefully, like the contents were precious. "My son Miguel, he's 16, she began. "Smart kid, good kid, but he's been struggling. His father left when he was young and we don't have money for college. I've been working 2 jobs just to keep us afloat." She pulled out a drawing from the folder. "But he loves to build things. Always has. He made this design for a tiny house, drew it himself, figured out all the measurements." I looked at the drawing. It was remarkably detailed for a teenager. Clean lines, proper proportions, thoughtful design. "He wants to be an architect," Rebecca continued, her voice thick with emotion. "But he thinks it's impossible. Says people like us don't get to dream that big." She looked at me directly. "I heard about your foundation, about what you're doing. And I thought, I hoped, maybe there's a path for him here." I studied the drawing again, seeing Dad's careful attention to detail reflected in this young man's work. Seeing myself at 16, thinking I'd never be more than Dad's helper on construction sites. "How soon can Miguel start?" I asked. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "Really? You'll take him?" "We have a youth program starting in January," I said. "High school students can take classes after school and on weekends. If Miguel's serious about architecture, we'll teach him the foundation, literally and figuratively. Carpentry, engineering basics, structural design. Then we'll connect him with architects in the area who can mentor him." "I don't know how to thank you," Rebecca said, wiping her eyes. "Thank me by making sure he shows up and does the work," I replied. Talent matters, but commitment matters more. After she left, Emily smiled at me. "You know you just changed that kid's life, right?" "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I just opened a door. He still has to walk through it." That evening, I drove back to the 20-acre property. The construction crew was gone. The site quiet, except for the wind. I walked through the unfinished building, my footsteps echoing in the empty halls. In the main training hall, I found the corner where we'd installed a memorial wall, photos of Dad at various construction sites over the years, his favorite tools mounted in shadow boxes, and the letter, his letter to me, framed and preserved behind glass. I read it again, the words as powerful as they'd been 2 years ago. Build something that matters. I'd spent 2 years doing exactly that. The foundation had trained over 200 students, 93% job placement rate, lives changed, futures built, families supported. And now this community center, which would triple our capacity and impact. But standing there in the quiet building, I realized something important. The real legacy wasn't the building or the programs or even the students we'd helped. It was the choice to build bridges instead of walls, to create opportunities instead of hoarding them, to believe that people, all people, deserved a chance to become something more. William had made different choices. Maybe he'd learn from them. Maybe he wouldn't. But I had offered him the same thing Dad offered me, a chance. The rest was up to him. I pulled out my phone and texted Marcus. "Final walkthrough tomorrow at 9 a.m. Bring coffee. We're finishing this right." Then I drove home through the snow, past the house on Maple Ridge Drive, now decorated with lights and filled with other people's laughter, past the old training center where tomorrow's builders were learning today's lessons, past all the places where this story had unfolded. And for the first time in my life, I understood what Dad meant when he said people matter more than things. Because things, houses, companies, money, they come and go. They decay and get rebuilt and change hands and lose their meaning. But people? The right people? Doing the right work for the right reasons? That legacy lives forever. And that's exactly what I intended to build. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.